Welcome to JCTV Spotlight on the Arts. Today is April 18th, 2018, and we're sitting in the great capital city of Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri. Here on Spotlight on the Arts, today we turn the spotlight to a couple of gentlemen out of New Haven, Missouri. I'm your host, Rick Jey, and I want to thank you for being with us today as we open a window into the art of glass blowing. Yes, I said glass blowing. So I want you, if you would, to please join me in welcoming Mr. Gary Rice and Lance Stroheker. I am truly excited to turn the spotlight on both of you today. So welcome.
Thank you.
Rick. Well, Gary, I want to start off with you. If I may call you by your first name.
Please.
Please tell us a little bit about you and those highlights of your life that best describes Gary Rice.
Well, I started out, actually I was born in Southern California, moved to Northern California in the early 70s, and that's really when the studio started in the early 70s. Worked there until we started out actually as stained glass artists, and the studio then evolved into a glass blowing studio after I had some access to another glass blower studio and was bitten by the bug. We moved to Missouri in 2003, originally to Clarksville, Missouri, and then on to New Haven about 10 years ago.
I see. And Mr. Stroheker, Lance, if I may call you by your first name, can you tell us a little bit about you? You seem to be on the younger side with this older gentleman sitting here. But
I was born in 1978 in Pittsfield, Illinois, is my hometown. And finished high school there. I was always into arts and took all the art classes I could take. I always kind of joke around and tell everyone I became an artist when my mom taught me how to draw Santa Claus when I was 5. And then from high school, I went to Lincoln College and got my associates in fine arts, and then carried on to Edwardsville, Illinois to be an art teacher, and took as many mediums in the arts as I could take there as well. And glass blowing was one of the classes that I took, and that's where I got bit by the glass bug and decided that's what I really wanted to do with myself.
So welcoming both of you and inviting you both to be here with us on Spotlight on the Arts. You both look, especially Lance, I can see that you look at the art of glass blowing in an artful sense, I guess we could say.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I can see how that would be inspiring just to deal with that. So it's something new to us. I know the folks are really going to enjoy the viewers on today's show. And we do promise, the second half of our show, we're going to actually see a clip on the actual process of a piece being done. I was invited to their business, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and took some great footage of the total process. So you want to stay with us. Well, I turn back to Gary and Lance. Can you tell us, Lance, when you were, or how you was first inspired to become a glass blower artist, and what inspires you now to continue your interest in such?
Well, in college is where I first got into glass. I was in a sculpture class, and a friend of mine brought some glass into one of his sculptures, and I asked him, where'd you get the glass? And he said he made it, and I didn't believe him. He said, right through these doors here is a whole hot studio. So after the class, he took me in there, and I was just, it was really attractive. It was molten material, it was magic, and just adrenaline rushed in a way, because it was a whole new life when it came to art. And I always liked the challenge, and I thought if I could learn how to sculpt and make things out of molten glass that's gravity's pulling at it, that, you know, I'd be pretty proud as an artist, and it would be a fun material to try to work with and master throughout life. And that's where I got first bit by a glass bug, and then
awesome.
Continued just to work with it ever since.
I see. And now
Well, for me, it's kind of a convoluted way that I got to glass blowing. The studio started out as a stained glass studio. In fact, on the West Coast, we're still a very well-known stained glass studio. And the reason we started to melt glass really wasn't to blow it. It was to actually make sheet glass for our stained glass studio. And once we got the glass molten and saw what its capacity was, we realized rolling it out into the flat sheets was probably the most boring thing you could do with the glass. There was another gentleman in our area who had a glass studio, and this is a really perfect time to give a shout out to my wife. My wife actually made contact with the studio first and went and worked as an offhand assistant. So my wife was actually the first one to actually have a blowpipe in her hands. We became friends with these folks, and although their product was solid work, he had the basic skills of glass blowing. And I did some work for him in trade of learning how to manipulate the glass on the end of a blowpipe. It was pretty crude what I learned, and I spent about 5 years, 6 years just dropping a lot of glass on the floor trying to master the skill. Ultimately, I got to go and blow with some Venetian style blowers in Alberta, Canada, and it was an exponential jump in my learning. And I've just been blowing glass ever since. We still do stained glass. In fact, we do etch glass, fused glass, slump glass, cast glass, and offhand blowing. So we really pretty much do just about anything you can imagine with glass. But nothing is quite as thrilling as blowing the glass and having something 2,000 degrees on the end of a stick.
I can imagine. I mean, I witnessed, as I said earlier, I told the viewers about the clip that will be coming up in the second portion of the show. And just watching it is inspirational. And you do have an invitation to people to come and watch throughout the year. So we'll talk about that. And he's talking about a blow pipe. That's B-L-O-W, blowing as you blow. So that's interesting. Well, I don't want to lose the thought of, I know you all have some foundation with family. I thought, Lance, you said you had you was proud of a nephew, I believe. Did you want to do some shout outs? Or?
Yeah, I would like to say hello to my 3 nephews. My oldest nephew, Isaiah, and then my second oldest, Bodie. And then Liam, he's only 8 months old, but I'm pretty proud of him too. And they mean a lot to me in my life.
A few years down the road, when he turns to YouTube and he sees Uncle Lance talking about him, he'll remember that.
Yeah.
And how about you, Gary?
Well, most of our family is on the West Coast, but I really want to give a shout out to my wife, who unfortunately would be here, except that she's having some dental work done today, and my granddaughter Caitlin, both who have really dedicated themselves to making the shop successful. And also I want to give a shout out to all of our friends out there, friends of the studio, who really, in their way, have made what's happening right here possible by coming in and supporting us.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, and we will also meet the granddaughter, Caitlin, in the clip that will be coming up the second half hour. Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to take you to an action there at Astral Glass in New Haven, Missouri, right on the Missouri River. And we're sharing the footage, like I say, in a second segment, and it's worth watching. So stay in your seats. I would like to now ask you, Gary, what is your favorite subject matter when working on a project? Is it Christmas bulbs, decanters, what have you?
You know, really, that's a really often asked question. And we always stumble over it because really the most exciting thing to do for us is anything that's new. Anybody who makes something and maybe makes it in a repetitive sense, like we make a lot of drinking tumblers. And though each drinking tumbler is this wonderful little journey, and we take it very seriously. The thrill of making something new, where you're out on the edge and you're working with techniques or creating something that you really don't know is going to be successful or not, I think that's really the most exciting thing. The glass, working with glass is really in the moment. Most other crafts you can work, and when the piece is halfway done, you can take a break and come back to it later. Blowing glass, once the glass is on the end of the rod, you're on the hook until the piece is done. So there's this evolution that happens with any new piece, and every step along the way, it's unknown whether you're going to get from point A to point B until you get there. And the other thing that makes that really interesting is that if somewhere in that process of that new piece you realize you started at point A, but you're not going to be able to get to point B, in the moment you have this beautiful piece of glass that's colored up, and even though it's not going to be what your vision was, in the moment you decide what it is going to be, communicate it to whoever's assisting you, and then you travel off in that path. And a lot of times that leads to discoveries that bring about whole new pieces.
Yes, it's like in an excursion. As it happens in the moment, as you described, I can see that, where I sit down with a canvas for 3 months and hoping to get the final that I want, and I can cover up my mistakes. Where in the glass blowing, I see a mistake, a happy mistake, can be really.
Yeah, sometimes mistakes just take you to a place that you didn't intend to go to, but when you get there, sometimes the next day you look at the piece and go, gosh, that's fantastic. I wonder if we could do that on purpose next time.
Exactly. Can I repeat that process? And how about you, Lance? So what's your favorite subject matter?
We both sit in the same boat of anything new is wonderful. And the fact of it just being on that edge of doing something new and the excitement of making a new piece. And it's really nice to, Gary and I have been working together for quite a while, and we don't even have to communicate much, and we know, like he was saying, the piece sometimes can go to a different journey than what you planned, and
exactly.
And that's when it's a new piece, it does make it real exciting. Nature inspires both of us. We spend a lot of time paddling on the river as much as we can, and I make bird's nest where I'm on a driftwood piece from the Missouri River. And those really feed my heart and soul a lot. I've been making the nest for quite a while, we also do a lot of found object incorporated pieces, like when we do art shows and galleries and stuff.
Super.
Because that's what we found that really feeds our heart and soul.
Excellent. Sounds awesome.
Some fun pieces.
Your work speaks well for itself. Well, speaking of galleries, as you know, I've partnered with the Department of Conservation, Missouri Department of Conservation, at the Runs Conservation Nature Center here in Jefferson City for an exhibit called Call to Nature's Art, and I understand you will be bringing in a piece on April 30th, or a couple pieces to demonstrate what you have developed in a nature or conservation sense. So I want to thank you for being part of that. I've been promoting it here now for the last 2 or 3 months. Can you share with me and the viewers just a hint possibly what to look for you might have in mind at this time?
Well, I can give you a hint of what I'm hoping to make. I have a log that we scavenged from someplace, and it's a section of a tree that's got a couple of holes in it, and that's about all the more I want to tell you. You'll have to go to the show to see what ends up being with that log.
I bet that there's going to be some glass somehow in that log. Now, how about you, Lance? Are you just kind of?
I'll probably be making one of mine. I'll make a real nice bird's nest, and then I got a plan to make some different eggs that I've never made. That'll be kind of cool.
Excellent, excellent. So. Well, gentlemen, we have to take a break, so hang with me. After the break, we turn back to Gary and Lance to tell us a little bit about the art of glass blowing and view the actual footage of the working process. So stay with me. I'll be right back.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Hello and welcome back for the second segment here today. I'm your host, Rick Jey, on Spotlight in the Yards. I have two gentlemen with me who are into the art of glass blowing. It's Mr. Gary Rice and Lance Stroheker from New Haven, Missouri, with a business known as Astral Glass. Sits within maybe 200 feet of the way it appeared on the Missouri River there in New Haven. What a great setting for an artist like myself and many of you others, or even for the art of glass blowing. So I turn now, if you will, turn with me to Mr. Gary Rice. Gary, before we go to the clip, can you briefly tell us about the origin of Astral Glass and how you and Lance became a team?
Well, actually, Astral Glass started in San Diego, California, as a stained glass studio. I had actually gone to school to be an electronic engineer, but along the way discovered glass, and through some serendipity, right after doing my first couple of panels, I got a commission at a restaurant. And the rest is history, as they say. The restaurant was popular and had a lot of exposure, and so a lot of commissions followed. We were a stained glass studio really until about 1989. We continued being a stained glass studio, but in the late 80s is where I started to blow glass. In the early 2000s, we decided we were going to leave Northern California and come back to the Midwest. We like the pace of life, we like the small communities, and the cost of utilities was a lot more reasonable than Northern California. I was working on my shop and renovated a building in a little town called Clarksville, Missouri, on the Mississippi River. And shortly after opening it, this gentleman walked in the door. I had brought an assistant with me from California, and about 4 months after we opened, he decided he was going back to California, and I had no idea where I was going to find an assistant. I didn't know anybody, much less a glass blower, and that's when Lance walked through the door.
I heard about them, and when I was in college in Edwardsville, I heard about 2 glass blowers coming from California to Clarksville.
Wow. Now, is your town, Edwardsville, close to Clarksburg?
It's not. Clarksville is about a half hour from my hometown of Pittsfield.
I see.
And an artist friend of ours who moved to Louisiana, I blew glass with him.
Oh,
and I was about 10 minutes away, and he was the one that told me about, well, there's glass blowers coming. Mm-hmm. And I had moved back home to my hometown, and I had a Monday off of work, and I just drove down there to see if I could get in the hot shop, work the gallery for a few days to work a little bit in the hot shop or sweep or mop. And I met Gary and told him that this is really what I want to do with my life. And it was really heaven sent for all of us. They needed an assistant, and I wanted it as a lifestyle. And I started a 5-year apprenticeship with them, and this June will be 15 years. We've all been working together now, and they can't get rid of me, Rick. So.
Oh, that's great. I noticed, as you'll see in the clip, how well they work together in almost like automatic coordination from, you can see the skills and the training or the partnership in the works. So, well, we're going to go ahead and start the clip, and if you'll go ahead and explain to us the basic steps, pardon me, by description of the process, if you would, Gary.
Sure. So I think the first thing you see in the clip is me taking a pipe from a little heater box, and the glass won't stick to the pipe unless the pipe is hot. So I'll gather some glass on the end of the rod, and then I'll go and apply color. In this case, I'm applying a blue cobalt to the outside, and I take that back to the heat, melt it in, and then put it into a mold that allows me to color that, or cut that cobalt color on the outside into stripes. And you'll see that I take those stripes, and by turning the pipe and dragging the tip of the glass on the table, it spirals those stripes around the outside of the piece. After that, I'll start a bubble in the piece, and then I'll put it back in the heat just to fire polish the surface to make sure that it's smooth, so that when I gather more glass over the top of that it doesn't pick up any bubbles.
So forcing the glass into the little star-shaped fixture that establishes the glass.
It'll actually cut the color on the surface into stripes.
The stripes.
So that's so now I've got these cobalt stripes on the outside. So even though I polished this piece to prepare it to gather the next layer of glass, in this particular process, you'll actually see after I get the glass on the end of the rod that I picked something out of it. And that was actually a bubble that the piece picked up, which we try to avoid. But if they're there, we try and pick them out. So that little thing you see me grab with the tweezers and pull away from the glass is actually a little bubble in the glass. And then I use a thing that looks like a wooden ladle. In the trades, we call them a block. It's a wooden ladle that's soaked in water, and that allows me to distribute that hot glass evenly around the inside bubble. Once that's done, I heat the piece up, and I blow it out into its final shape. And we do call it a dance with heat and gravity. So each piece reacts slightly differently, so no two pieces are exactly the same. And the rolling of the pipe on the bench is actually a balancing act. When you watch a glass blower work, it's very easy to see the right hand as the star of the show because it has a tool in it, it's shaping the piece. But in fact, the hardest skill to learn is the left-hand skill that's rolling the pipe. Because if the glass is able to be manipulated, then it's liquid. And so the rolling of the pipe at the precise speed to make that liquid not fall and stay straight off the end of the pipe is one of the most difficult skills to acquire. So after the piece is blown and we get it as close to its shape as possible on the blowpipe, so most of what you do on the blowpipe is create the bottom half of the piece. Once the bottom is put on the piece, and you'll see in the demo I use a torch to heat the bottom of the piece, then I flatten the spot on the bottom of the piece, and then Lance prepares another rod with a little bit of hot glass on the end of it. That rod is called a punty. And you can tell most hand-blown glass pieces by the fact that they will have that mark on the bottom. And
now,
go ahead.
at some point, if I may interrupt you, I noticed that you took the piece, you blew into the glass, and then you twirled it.
Right.
And are you just expanding the length of it?
Exactly. So if you blow the glass and you hold the pipe horizontal, the pipe will blow a round bubble. If you hold the pipe up, it'll blow an onion-shaped bubble. If you hold the pipe down, it'll blow a teardrop-shaped bubble. So basically, we're holding the pipe slightly down because that's the basic shape we're going for, is a teardrop. The piece I'm blowing is called a stemless wine goblet, and it's basically an oversized goblet top without a stem on it. So I swing the pipe to stretch it out to get it to be as close to the form as I possibly can. Then there's a neckline that's put in the piece, and if you watch the process, you'll see that neckline is revisited quite often with a tool that we call jacks. It looks like a giant pair of scissors. At the very end, Lance will bring that rod with a little bit of hot glass, will stick it to the bottom of the piece and break it off the blowpipe. Now that piece is reheated on the front side and it's stretched and trimmed and then opened to its final shape.
Now you took scissors at some point, and you was cutting the some portion of the piece. Now,
Right.
What was that all about?
So when the piece is broken off the blowpipe and it's on the punny rod, where it came off the blowpipe, it tends to be thicker than everywhere else in that bubble. So we get the front end of the piece hot, or the part that's been broken off the blowpipe, and we stretch that out in order to thin the wall out and make it match the wall thickness of the rest of the bubble. And then we've got this little ruffled area that's created by stretching it out with the tweezers, and we trim that off clean to make the lip clean. And then at the very end, when the piece is opened up to its final shape, Lance will take a wooden paddle and trail along that lip to make sure the lip is nice and straight and true to the piece.
Now, I noticed that you wasn't whistling. Come over here, Lance, come. I never saw any of that. Lance just kind of came in. He appeared, then he disappeared. He come in, but at the right time every time. Now, that had to take a few years of coordination, what have you. Have you any comments on that?
From being in the other room, I can listen to the pipe and where it slides across the bench, and when he sets it into the yoke to go into the glory hole, and so there's lots of ways that I can not be in the room. I'm helping a customer out front, and I'm listening to where he's at throughout the piece, and then I can say, excuse me, and I'm go back in and help him out.
That was the reason for my question, because you seemed to be right on cue, and I thought, how's he know? Is this a mental thing that Gary and Lance says? Well, somewhat. But so you do listen then for the rolling of the pipe.
Yeah, certain tools you'll set down.
And some of our products we've made so many times that the time frame becomes just ingrained. You know how long it's going to take your partner to get to the place where he needs your assistance. So, I want to make it clear that I happen to make that glass that day, but Lance makes as many of those tumblers as I do, and I take his role. So generally when we're producing things for the shop, we take turns, and that keeps each of us out of the heat for a little bit of the time while the other person is making a piece, and then we switch off, and it gives us each a break from the heat. Standing in front of the equipment can be a pretty brutal environment.
I can imagine. Well, now we've met Colette, the granddaughter. Caitlin. We've met Gary, and we've met Lance. Now I've got to ask a question. Sophia, where did she come into this program?
Go ahead.
Oh, Lord. Sophia is the mannequin leg that's sticking out of the wall. And as you can see in our shop, we have quite an eclectic collection of signs and things, and we love it. We call it our funk that helps us create our art. And Sophia came from a barn in Arkansas. It used to stick out of the barn, and Judy's sister would come and visit, and they were taking a road trip to visit another sister in Montana, and Judy's sister brought Sophia. And so we named her Sophia and took pictures with her in different spots, coming out of my Subaru grill and coming out of the barbecue grill. And then they took her all the way to Montana and took her into diners, and waitresses would sign her, and they got them post-stamped on her. And so, and then Judy's sister Pam brought her back to the barn, told the farmer about where Sophia had been, and he said we could have Sophia. So we hung her up in our hot shop, and it's quite comical sometimes. You get little kids come in.
Now we know the history of Sophia, the leg. And as you'll see in the clip, you see many artifacts there of history along the Missouri River in New Haven. Well, Gary and Lance, that was a great demonstration. Thanks again for inviting me to tape such an event. I want to thank you for contributing to Spotlight on the Arts. It's really been inspiring with visiting with you and sharing the time and the lights with you today. Would you like to leave us with your website address, or where people can reach you if they have questions or commissions? And how about the invitation to the viewers that come in and watch the demonstration? You have a gallery set up for that.
Yes, we do. You can find us at 133 Front Street. We're down in the Old Town in New Haven. New Haven's a wonderful little town, and they've taken their old town, the downtown that's on the river. We have a wonderful levee walk, and the downtown is an arts and entertainment district. We have a venue for live music. We have a distillery who produces gold medal winning spirits. And we have some wonderful shops in our town. We have a couple rows of theater seating in our gallery where you can watch the glass blowing, and we blow 5 days a week. It's just a really fun place to spend the afternoon, and we're surrounded by some of the best wineries in the state.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, gentlemen, on behalf of Spotlight on the Arts here at JCTV and myself. I want to say thank you so much. Hope to see you again.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us, Rick.
Okay. Well, next year on Spotlight on the Arts, you'll be hearing from Austin Lambert, the naturalist at the Missouri Conservation Runge Conservation Nature Center, who will be working with me on the exhibit that'll be running through the months of May and June. So I want to invite you to that. And that'll be taped on May 2nd, so we'll be looking for that, please. Then my next guest on Missouri, Mid-Missouri Art News, that's going to be Suzanne Luther and Lester Perkins, both from the area, Columbia, Missouri, and also Jeff City. That program is scheduled to be taped on the 16th of May this year, 2018. My thanks goes out to JCTV producer and crew, Gloria Inlow, the producer and crew. Chris is here with us today. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us in such a great event today. Look for more Spotlight on the Arts right here on JCTV. And don't forget YouTube. I'm Rick Jey saying thanks, and see you next time.